Joining me now is the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sir Mel Stride. Sir Mel, I cannot believe what I am reading in the Sunday Express, which has interviewed you. Now, this is a question that you've resisted answering me for many, many shows. And listen to yourself now in this newspaper. Rachel Reeves should resign if Wednesday's budget results in more people paying more tax, according to the man who wants to hold her job. You've said, and I quote, "I think if she puts taxes up in this budget, having said that she wouldn't, and given the mess she has created, she should step down." Finally, you've had an epiphany, Mel Stride.
Well, I know you've been urging me, Camilla, and good morning, to be saying this for a very long time, and because I don't think you should run around constantly asking for everybody to resign over everything. But I think if we've reached the point where this government in opposition made a lot of very clear commitments, including in their manifesto, then promptly junked a lot of them and did different things in office, and has now arrived at a point where once again we are led to believe they will be putting up taxes on hard-working people, which is something that they've said they wouldn't do, then yeah, I think it's time for her to step aside, I'm afraid.
All right, so when should she step aside? Thursday, Wednesday afternoon?
Well, I leave that to for others to think about, but I think a position does finally become untenable if you go into a general election saying that you're not going to put up taxes on hard-working people, that you then do that because that's what National Insurance on Employers actually did back in October of last year. Then you have an emergency budget in the spring, in March, and you say, that's it, end of, we're not going to be coming back for more, and so on, not putting up taxes on hard-working people. And then another 6 months later, that appears to be exactly what you're going to do. I'm afraid there is a limit, I think, to everybody's patience in those circumstances.
All right, so who should replace her if she steps down?
Well, I leave that to others. I mean, if the Prime Minister's still in his position when all this happens, if it happens, then it'll be for whoever is Prime Minister at that time to take that decision. Should
it be a man? Because the Chancellor thinks that she's been treated in a sexist manner by being described as Rachel from accounts and suggestions that she's out of her depth. Would a bloke do a better job, Mel Stride?
I am absolutely solid on the fact that it could be a man or a woman. It makes no difference. This isn't a question of gender. It's a question of economic competence. And I think all this mansplaining business is a bit of chaff. It's a bit of a distraction to try and get away from the basic facts, which we've got unemployment at a 5-year high. We've got anemic, flatlining growth. We've got inflation that's almost double the level it was under us, and we've got an economy that's in a very bad position, saddled up with debt, and we're paying 100 billion a year just on servicing that debt at the moment, and yet this government's going out and borrowing more money and spending more money and driving up inflation and putting us in a very precarious situation.
How much responsibility, let's be honest now, how much responsibility should the Conservatives take for what this budget is turning out to be, in the sense of all of the economic indicators that you've listed there? We could have equally applied to the last government, couldn't we?
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
Well, let's do that. So on the day of the general election, we had gone through a really difficult period with COVID and inflation coming as a result of the Ukraine-Russia war. But nonetheless, we had near record level of employment, near record low level of unemployment. We had inflation down bang on target at 2%. We had the highest growing economy in the G7, and we'd had 13 consecutive months of real wage growth. So that is the economy that Rachel Reeves inherited, and it hasn't taken her long to have put us in a very, very different position, I'm afraid.
But we also had, and you're failing to mention it, low growth, high tax and high spend. So the GB audience looks at you and looks at Labour and everybody giving their lines and just says, well, plus ça change. You know, it's just a continuation of the status quo that was established for 14 years by the Conservatives.
So I think, look, there's a very different set of circumstances. Rachel Reeves has been the author of her own misfortune. It was her who chose to load a load of taxes on businesses and killed growth. They talked down the economy. They borrowed and spent a lot of money, which has driven up inflation and interest rates. And it's therefore no surprise we've ended up in this parlous situation. The situation during the last few years of the last Conservative administration were that we had COVID, which shrank the UK economy by over 10% overnight. You'd have to go back to the Great Frost of 1714 to have had any sign of that kind of shock hitting our economy. And of course we had the Ukraine-Russia war that put up inflation at the back end of 2022 to over 11%, and we had to bring that down. So nobody at that time was suggesting we shouldn't have been spending the money we were on supporting millions of jobs and households up and down the country. We did that, and we did it, Camilla, on the back of our previous record of having got the deficit down since 2010 when we took over from Labour. So we did it because we had a stronger economy that was able to do that. So I think these
you did it on the back of taxpayers, I think. Also, I mean, when you talk about the difficulty of COVID, and we appreciate that, we appreciate furlough, there are many that think that Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor, completely mismanaged it, and no mention at all of the billions of COVID loan fraud that we had to also shoulder the burden for economically.
Look, inevitably, whenever something as cataclysmic as COVID, which, as I say, shrank the economy overnight by 10%, and people were then at that point speculating we'd have mass unemployment at a level that we'd never seen in our country in perhaps a century, big dramatic things had to happen, interventions, and it had to be done at speed. And inevitably, when you do things at speed on a large scale, mistakes are made, there are hard edges and so on. But I think most people would accept that we got through that period because of government intervention, because of furlough, which was largely a success.
Yeah.
And we had unemployment obviously lower on the day of the general election than it is under this government. Under this government, Camilla, unemployment is at a 5-year high.
I've just pointed that out to Catherine Atkinson. On COVID, do you agree with Baroness Hallett's conclusion that it was Boris Johnson's fault that we didn't close down earlier and that the former Prime Minister is responsible for the death of 23,000 people?
Well, I think this is something that will be debated for a very long time, but inevitably, when something of that magnitude happens, not every decision will have been absolutely right, and it's impossible, of course, to know what the counterfactuals would have been with any certainty. And my heart goes out to all of those who perished as a consequence of this terrible virus that visited our country. I think we shouldn't also overlook that the report, if I may, Camilla, says that the vaccine rollout, of course, we were world leading in what we did with that, and that was on Boris's watch and would have saved countless lives.
The headline was Boris Johnson's basically killed 23,000 people unnecessarily because he didn't lock down soon enough. Is that right or fair?
Well, I think I've answered that question, which is
you haven't.
Clearly when
is it
something
right and is
very
it fair?
Like COVID, when something very significant like COVID visits our shores and you have to move at pace with something that is a once-in-a-century event, and there's no, it's not replaying something that's happened before, and therefore we've learned from that, inevitably mistakes would have been made. It's not possible to know exactly what the counterfactuals would have been, but it is certainly the case that where people died under those circumstances, then of course that's a matter of huge regret. that would have happened. But I think that does have to be balanced by some of the things that absolutely were right, such as the vaccine rollout that would have saved many, many lives, and also having an economy that was strong enough actually to withstand the economic impact of that, and that is down to the work that we did on the economy when we came into power in 2010.
Why are the Tories only advocating £23 billion worth of welfare savings when Jeremy Hunt, writing in the Sunday Telegraph today, points out that actually if you returned working age welfare to pre-pandemic levels, you could actually save £47 billion, not 23. So you're actually being a bit too conservative, pardon the pun, with your own welfare savings.
Well, you get skewered either way, don't you, Camilla? You have people who say, well, that's far too much, it's unrealistic, and other people say, well, you could go much, much further. What matters here is that we have a proper, considered look at these issues, which is why we've taken time to come forward with that first instalment of welfare reform. And the second point I would make is what we've said to date, the 23 billion is a first instalment. We are still looking closely at welfare and a number of other areas, and wait till you see the manifesto in about 3 to 3.5 years' time, and then we will have our full proposals in there, and we will make sure we get the balance right between supporting the most vulnerable, which is very important in a civilised society, but at the same time understanding that it is hard-working taxpayers that foot the bill for those benefits, and that we need to get people off benefits and into work.
All right, Mel Stride, you need that manifesto to be good, don't you? Because internal polling reveals that you might be left with just 14 seats.
Well, it's not internal polling. There was no polling commissioned by the Conservative Party, and I believe it relates to a period last summer. But nonetheless, the substantive point of us having a major challenge is there, and we recognise that. What we are doing is ruthlessly holding this government to account, myself on the economy, on your show now, but also grooming gangs and inquiries, and Lord Mandelson and Angela Rayner, and making sure that we hold the government's feet to the fire. But we also do that deep thinking around the big challenges that we face as a society. At the heart of our economic offer, making sure we get on top of the size of government, get spending down so we can get taxes down and get the deficit down at the same time.
So Mel Stride, we live in hope. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, he's changed his tune, resisting my call for the Chancellor to resign. Don't really get the point of opposition MPs saying that the Chancellor is economically incompetent, and then when asked, should she resign, saying, oh, no, I don't think so. So we've had a little bit of a shift. Maybe it's because Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, suggested she should resign last week. So let's see whether she remains in post after Wednesday or not, and who will then call for her to resign or not. As ever, let us know what you think. Do send in your comments and reaction to gbnews.com/your slay. Your slay? No, your say. Although slay, I believe, is an internet term that we could apply to this show, actually.